Hello everyone, my name is Jana Stupowski and I am your data visualization instructor. In today's video, we're going to talk about what thought process you should go through when you're faced with working with a new data set that you've never seen before. When a data set lands on your desk, or better, in your email, the first thing you want to do overall is to understand the industry where the data set comes from. Let's say a client approaches you about working on a project for them, and that client comes from a particular industry. Then what you ultimately want to do is to learn how that client thinks. Understanding the client's industry, the metrics and the key performance indicators that matter the most in the industry, and then understand the operational definitions of different variables that can be found in the data set are all very important components of the work that needs to be done before you even start working with the data set. Overall, we really need to understand how the client thinks, and that can be accomplished through multiple ways. One way to do this is to do some research. The easiest thing is to do research on internet, but we have to be careful about the resources that we look into. Some of it could be scientific literature, but not all of it. If you want to, for instance, learn something about retail industry and what are the numbers that matter the most in retail industry, a lot of ideas can be found simply online, and frankly, it's kind of common sense. In retail, the objective is to sell stuff, whether it's groceries or clothes or shoes or anything else. Sales is one of the typical key performance indicators in many industries. So again, doing research on internet or in scientific literature could be one way how you can find some answers and learn more about the industry. Another way to do it is to talk to some people that are familiar with the industry. Typically, it may be difficult sometimes to pinpoint the people from industry, especially if you are a student, because you may not have enough of a professional network to be able to reach out to those people. But on the other hand, if you are a university student, there are a lot of faculty members at your own college or other colleges that are experts in different fields and are very familiar with how certain industries function. And so those could be very good resources for some questions that you may have about the industry. And typically the way it would work is you would do your own research online and in the literature, and then probably find some answers, and some answers you may be more comfortable than others. And you would take your research findings and then verify them with someone who actually understands the industry. Another excellent resource where you can learn about the industry are governmental websites, whether it's local government, federal government, or state government. Think about recent pandemic, COVID-19. Probably a lot of people would visit CDC website and try to learn about COVID, the disease, and that's where people would go and look at how many people are being vaccinated, how many people have died of COVID, or how many people have been infected, and they can look at it. They can look at the data for the whole country, or they can zoom into their own state or even a county. But governmental websites and governmental resources are always very valid and very credible resources of information. Let me now share with you how I would approach a project when I'm handed a new data set to work with. What we're looking at is a dashboard that explains hospital bed occupancy in various counties across southern Alabama, Mississippi, and Florida Panhandle. We have a map of counties to choose from. We can select what week we want to look at, but basically for a given county and for the selected week, we can see how full the hospitals are, and we have a timeline here of how full they were in the past. Then we can see how full the ICUs are, and then how COVID-19 affected the ICUs. In other words, how many ICU beds are occupied by actual COVID patients. Now, to build this dashboard, we had to have a data. And the data for this dashboard came from a governmental website. This is how the actual data set looks like. You can see it's an Excel spreadsheet with lots of rows and headers for different columns or variables at the very top. As I'm scrolling right, this is showing you this is a very wide spreadsheet with a lot of columns, in other words, variables. And if you can see here, it's a really, really long spreadsheet with a lot of rows. So the place where we got this spreadsheet from is this governmental website called healthdata.gov. I will briefly walk you through different parts of this website, but basically what I'm going to demonstrate to you is what kind of information you can find here. This would be what in data world normally is called a data dictionary or a metadata. It's basically a document or place that helps you understand all kinds of components of the data set. It helps you understand what different variables mean, what different columns mean, what kind of data types can be found there, and what exactly do those numbers in those columns mean. Back to the website. This would be an example of a very formal data dictionary or metadata. As you can see, at the very top of the website is the name of this report. It's called COVID-19 Reported Patient Impact and Hospital Capacity by Facility. I want to draw your attention to by facility. That indicates how detailed this report is. It is basically broken down into the details by healthcare facility. And we've got data in here for hospitals from many counties around the country. So that's why this data set has a lot of rows and a lot of columns, because there are a lot of individual hospitals contributing to this report. But if you scroll down, we can see when this data set was created, how many times has it been viewed and downloaded, but that's not really what we need for learning what's in it. What we really need to know is what starts here. What's in the data set? We've got over 270,000 rows and over 100 columns, and this is very important. Each row is an aggregated facility report for a given collection week, meaning that if you go back to the data set, you can see that each row in this report represents one facility in one city and county in the country, giving a report on all these different variables for the particular week in which they were reporting. And as you scroll down further, you can now see what different columns in the data set mean. We are only seeing a few, but city is the city of the facility reporting. Address column means that it's the address of the facility reporting. But then I'm going to unveil all the other columns, and here we're getting into a lot of details. A column labeled total beds 7-day average means it's a number field, not a text field, but it's an average of total number of all staffed inpatient and outpatient beds in the hospital, including all overflow, observation, and active surge/expansion beds used for inpatient and for outpatients, and some additional details. This is way too detailed for what we really need to know, but this demonstrates how formal and how detailed this data dictionary for this particular document is. Such details are very common, especially with federal data sets. A lot of federal agencies have dedicated data sections on their websites where you can find all kinds of data sets, and they're very well described, and they have very good data dictionaries or metadata descriptions. So keep that in mind as you work with different data sets in the future. And now let me show you an example of a very informal and very loose metadata document or data dictionary. It's something that I had to create myself for a project, and I basically just built it on my own by taking notes from the research that I've done and from conversations that I've done with people to learn about this particular data set. This is a dashboard that describes academic proficiency in math and reading or English in various public school systems in Mobile and Baldwin counties in Alabama, and it compares them in the state of Alabama. There are 4 tabs, and we can show reading and math proficiency in many different ways, in very different and very detailed ways. But all this data came from a detailed data set from the Alabama State Department of Education. Again, this has a lot of rows and a lot of columns, not as many as the previous one, but in here we've got every public system name in the state of Alabama, and they're tracking different subjects, grades, genders, race, ethnicity, subpopulation, etc., etc. Some of the variables at the very top here are kind of self-explanatory, and they don't really require you too much of a research. Race is a race, ethnicity is ethnicity, subpopulation. If you scroll down, you can kind of see what types of subpopulations are available. For instance, disabilities, students with disabilities. And all that can be easily done through looking at the options in the filter. We have homeless, students, migrant, and so that's kind of what the subpopulation means. But the data dictionary that was originally available with this data set didn't suffice my needs, and therefore I had to do some research on my own and eventually ended up building my own little metadata document. As you can see, this is very loose, but I've got some notes on the source of this data set. Then I've got the exact source link to make sure that I will get to the right website if someone asks where I got the data from. And through doing some research on the website and bugging some people on the phone, I eventually pinpointed down one person, and this is a state employee with information publicly available, so I can publish this, but I pinned down this employee that ended up being very helpful into explaining some of the things to me as they related to the data set. And then further down, I had some very loose notes. I wrote down names of different public school systems available in Baldwin County and Mobile County. I took notes such as proficiency is measured and scored by 1, 2, 3 on 4, and 3 or 4 means that students are proficient. And so as you scroll down, I've got some clip outs from the website and some additional links and some notes from that I've gathered from some other websites, and I've been thorough in saving links to the websites that I've got this information from so that I can eventually give them credit on the actual dashboard. So in this video, I have shared with you 2 different types of data dictionaries, or 2 different types of approaches when it comes to learning more about a new data set that you're tasked to working with. As you can see, metadata documents or data dictionaries can range from being very formal to being very loose. But they both accomplish one objective when it comes to learning about the new data set, and that is that you have to do your own research. You have to learn as much as you can about the data set by understanding the industry, by understanding the metrics, or in other words, KPIs, key performance indicators, that matter the most in that particular industry. And you also have to understand what the different columns or variables specifically mean in each particular data set that you work with. Thank you for watching.